So the main form of engagement and focus of U.S. foreign policy towards the continent has largely been limited in modern history. It's something that remains a bipartisan issue, which is a unique feature, really, for the continent relative to other parts of the world that tend to be divided down partisan lines pretty clearly. But it's also been something that's not on top of the list. It's not even really middle of the list often. And it varies between administrations in terms of who engages the most, and not necessarily along the lines that you would expect. George W. Bush, for example, with his start of PEPFAR, the HIV/AIDS program, and also the Millennium Challenge Corporation that focuses on compacts on the ground, development compacts on the ground, that was a really strong form of engagement we hadn't seen with other modern presidents. So that being said, the next administration will then their engagement on the continent will really rest on where policy formation is kept. Will that happen on the ground in terms of with bureaucrats, existing networks at embassies, at the embassy level, and also here in D.C.? Will it happen maybe a little bit higher up at the cabinet level? Will they be the most engaged, or will it be the president himself? And the type of policy we come from that, the amount of change we see in terms of engagement on the ground and how that engagement goes forward will really rest on who's in charge. The Obama administration was pretty strong on pushing back with some leaders who were seeking to extend their terms past constitutional mandates. So I would imagine that given that we'll have a change in leadership, that there's optimism within those groups to try and redevelop what's become a more difficult relationship to manage. Across the board, I think a lot of countries on the continent are really interested in being better linked with the U.S. from a market perspective. That there's an interest in really developing export relationships. That's why AGOA matters to a lot of these. AGOA being the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which offers free trade access to the U.S. market, somewhat tied to governance standards along with other benchmarks. And so really engaging on that and finding a way into U.S. markets is something of focus. And so there is a concern across a lot of leadership on the continent in terms of what's become a little bit more of an anti-trade narrative, or at least trade skepticism, if you will. Across a wide array of countries, there's a need for globalization to move forward on their growth agenda, and so any shift in any sort of long-term sense would be negative for the region.